to the Tarotology podcast, your place for all things tarot and tarot adjacent, including astrology, archetypes, and the collective unconscious. Today, we're going to be exploring Tarotscopes. So, what is a Tarotscope, you may ask? Good question. Well, a Tarotscope is kind of like a horoscope in that it gives you a foundation for the energies in play in a given day. And of course, it's not going to be necessarily specific for everyone. It's just kind of like a horoscope in that, you look at your sun sign and it's something that kind of applies to you, but maybe doesn't really delve into the specifics of a situation. But it's still good to know what the energy is like in a given day because it helps you to really prepare for all possibilities and try and figure out, is this a good day to ask my boss for a raise, or should I wait a little bit until maybe the stars align a little bit better and things might work out better for me? So it's really just to give you kind of a baseline idea of what to expect energy-wise in a day. And it works by using concepts from numerology. To get a Tarotscope for a day, you're basically going to be adding up the digits in the date. And to illustrate how to do this, let's take January 2nd of 2021 because I am so ready for 2020 to be over. So what we would do is we would start with the day, which is the 2nd, so 2. Then we would add the month, January 1, so 2 plus 1. And then we would add the year 2021. So when we add that all together, we get 2024. Next, we want to then reduce that so that we get a number between 1 and 22. So that way it corresponds with the 22 different cards in the major arcana. And for the purposes of a Tarotscope, we assign the Fool the number 22 because in numerology, you're not going to get a 0. And so it is both the 0 and the 22 trump. It begins and ends the cycle of the Fool's journey through the major arcana. So for this purposes, we're going to consider the Fool to be 22. So we want to basically calculate a digit between that 1 and 22. It's very unlikely you're going to get a 1. That hasn't happened since around the turn of the first millennia, and it probably won't happen again for several thousand years until we get to somewhere around like 10,000 AD. So don't expect to get a 1, but it is possible to get 2s and 3s and 4s and anything up to 22. And so what we want to do is calculate that number. And once we have that number, we can actually then further reduce it if it is a 2-digit number down to a single-digit number. And that gives us a better idea of the multiple energies in play. So let's start with the example that I just gave of January 2nd of 2021, which when we add up the digits, we get 2024. So then let's add up each of those digits. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4 gives us 8. Now this is a single digit. We don't need to reduce any further. We have our answer 8. And 8 corresponds with strength in the major arcana. In some decks, it may correspond with the Justice card, but for the purposes of this illustration, we're going to say it's strength. That follows the Rider-Waite tradition and tends to be more popular in most modern decks. So if we do get an 8 on a given day, well, what does that tell us? Well, strength. Strength is a fairly positive card. Every card has its own ups and downs, and there's no wholly good and wholly bad card. It's all a spectrum. But it overall tends to be a little bit more on the positive and reassuring side. But at the same token, we know that it can call upon us to use our strength. So strength is really more about inner fortitude and perseverance than it is about the external strength. Now, that's not to say there isn't a physical component to it. There is. But for the most part, when we deal with the strength card, we're looking at our inner strength, our inner resiliency, the bonds that we have with others. It's a card of bonding. It's a card of excellence under pressure, especially when it comes to relationships. It is a card of thriving in adversity, that diamond in the rough, right? The diamond that compresses the carbon and it comes out stronger and more valuable, more precious as a result of undergoing duress and stress. It is primarily a card that speaks to our own inner possibilities and our own inner divinity. Even there's a lemniscate, an infinity sign over the female depicted in the image in the most of the Rider-Waite versions, with the lion. Again, bonds, the attachment with animals, the attachment, this gentle nature that bonds with even the wild lion, is able to tame it, is able to connect with it, to speak with it, to walk with it as a friend, as an ally. And so there's this fantastic inner power, inner strength, right? It's pretty kind of self-explanatory a little bit. Sometimes a cigar is a cigar. But what does that tell us about a day? Well, that tells us that maybe it is a great day for us to connect with others, to work on our relationships. It is a good day for us to, considering it's at the beginning of the new year, January 2nd, it's a good day for us to work on those New Year's resolutions and stick to them and persevere. It's that stick to itness. It gives you that little boost to help you get over that challenge and get you through and give you that inner fortification to persevere. And so it's a great time to start the new year, I think. It's a positive note. It lets us know that we're on the right track. We can make our resolutions and we can keep them at least on January 2nd. We won't be breaking them that soon. So I encourage you to, when we hit the new year, to start thinking about what your New Year's resolutions will be and maybe make them on the 2nd instead of the 1st, and use that extra zhuzh and positive juju out there to try and see it through. So that's how we calculate a Tarotscope for a day. Now, we can use this in many, many ways. We can apply this concept to the year. And I talked a little bit about this in an earlier episode about 2020, the year of the Emperor, and how we just take the year 20204, and that gives us an idea of what to expect in a year. Now, 2020 was unfortunately a dysfunctional aspect of the Emperor rather than a functional aspect. So again, you got to make sure you're looking at all possibilities there. There's the positive aspects, but there's also the negative aspects, right? When we look again at the Strength card for January 2nd, well, what is the negative side of that potentially? The potential hurdles to getting a Strength card? Well, something has to happen for us to call upon our inner strength, right? There must be an impetus. There's something that could serve as a catalyst for us to then be strong and prove ourselves to ourselves. You can look at it that way. Maybe there is something that happens that requires us to step up to the plate a little bit. We can look at that for a given day. We can take it a step further. So we've looked at it for a year in general, as it applies to everyone, which doesn't get into too many specifics. We looked at the day as it applies to everyone, which again, doesn't really get into too many specifics, but it does give us a general idea, kind of like a horoscope does, of what energies are kind of out there. You can take it a step further and apply it to yourself. And that's where we get into the idea of the personal patterns of destiny. This is something that was first really introduced and fleshed out by Mary Greer in some of her works, and subsequently expanded on by several people, including Cynthia Hartline. And how do we apply that to ourselves? How do we use these energies? How do we create our own Tarotscope? And there's a couple of ways to do that. First is to understand your personal pattern of destiny, your birth card, as it were. And it's very similar to what I just did for the Strength card for January 2nd. So what you would do is calculate that for your birthday. Okay, so let's, for example, look at a pattern of destiny, a birthday card for U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Let us look at his birthday, February 12, 1809. So we can do the day 12 plus the month 2 plus the year 1809. And that gives us 1823. So now we want to add each of those digits together to get that number between 1 and 22, like I mentioned. So we add 1 plus 8 plus 2 plus 3, and that gives us 14. Well, remember how I mentioned we can also further reduce that. So how does that really work when we're talking about our personal patterns of destiny? If you do get a number between 10 and 22, you really have at least 2 numbers, and in one case, 3 numbers. What that means is that the larger digit, the 2-digit, the double-digit number, that is your life lesson. that is something that you have to deal with and be challenged by and struggle with and overcome and grow from and learn from. And when you reduce that number to a single digit, you're reducing it to your personality number or your soul number, to its base, who you are at your core. So for those people who have just a single digit, their life lesson and their personality card or soul card, it's the same. Because sometimes you are your own lesson in life. You have to really struggle with the balance and the dynamics and the challenges for that particular pattern, that particular personality card, personality number, soul card, even more challenging for you. So the highs are high and the lows are low, right? So everyone does have a life lesson. For some people, it is the same as their personality card, and for others, it is different. But the themes are still consistent in the constellations. And this may be getting into something I need to do a different episode on, but essentially there are certain patterns that emerge as we go through the major arcana, and there are certain themes that emerge. And so if you look at numerology and you look at how these cards align, there are certain patterns and themes that are consistent across the base numbers and their higher orders. Okay, back to President Lincoln. I went off on a tangent there. He is a 14. So the 14 corresponds with the Temperance card in the tarot. So that is President Lincoln's life lesson. And the Temperance card is a beautiful card. The card of, we think traditionally the word moderation is usually thrown out there. And yes, it is very much about finding a middle way, not going to extremes, finding a balance in that sense, and learning when to act and when not to act, and more importantly, when to transform. There's an aspect of alchemy and transmutation, transformation, transmogrification, any of the transes associated with this card. It is about tempering, taking that base, that steel, and making it harder, forging it and making it something stronger, making it something better. The alchemical reaction. We have the ancient alchemists in search of the philosopher's stone, trying to figure out how to transmute things into gold, right? This idea of taking a raw base material and making it more fortified, making it better, essentially. And so it's a lovely life lesson to have. It is, when we think about the president, we think about how he is very much a man who dealt with extremes. He had to bridge a divided country. And in that way, it really is the idea of bridging the conscious and the unconscious, the physical and the spiritual. It ends up being the last of the mind cards, the last of the subconscious cards in the major arcana, which also, again, probably another episode to dive into. But it is coming through the end of that subconscious journey and coming to a realization, a self-transformation, and beginning that self-actualization, beginning that higher step into the superconscious. So that is his life lesson. It's a big life lesson, right? Everyone has big life lessons when you really dig into it. But let's then reduce it into its single digit form to find out what his personality card is, his base personality is. So if we take 14, that's 1 plus 4, that gives us 5. And that's the Hierophant. And what is the Hierophant? The Hierophant is community. It is society and the pillars of institutions, legal systems, education systems, religious systems, the institution of marriage. It is law and order and structure and everything that keeps us functioning as a community. And it really is all about the community. There is just a love of society and a love of fellow man, but in its dysfunction, we can also see that out of balance and taking the rules too far, taking society and the concept of society too far, trying to create an ideal society that fits one's own views and mindset. So I would say that President Abraham Lincoln is probably the Hierophant, and the Temperance Hierophant especially, in its most functional form, in its purest, highest, serving his highest good form. So everyone has a pattern of destiny, a personal pattern of destiny. Everyone can calculate their own Tarotscope and figure out what it is. I go into more detail about the patterns of destiny in my classes and in my blog posts. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, I would refer you there. But let's take it a step further. We've calculated our card, our Tarotology card, our birthday card, our personal pattern of destiny based on our date of birth and the energy that was in play at the date of birth. Kind of like we cast a natal chart to figure out what the stars were, what the cosmos, what energy was reflected in the cosmos and the positioning of the stars. We do that for our natal chart in astrology. So this is same concept. It doesn't give us as much detail, again, as a natal chart does, but it gives us a sort of, it paints in broad strokes. So now we've figured out what our personal pattern of destiny is. Then we can look at the year we're in and we can calculate what our card of the year is. And it's very similar to calculating our personal card, our personal pattern of destiny card, except we just changed the year. So for instance, let's take Abraham Lincoln, born on February 12th, 1809. Let's say he were alive today. What would his personal year be? What would his personal Tarotscope year be in 2020? So we would add 2 plus 12 plus 2020, and that gives us 2034. So we add each of those digits up, 2 plus 0 plus 3 plus 4, and that gives us 9, the Hermit. And what is the Hermit? Well, the Hermit is, we think of the wise man, we think of the recluse, the mentor, the sage, the Obi-Wan Kenobi. He lights the way for us as we begin our exploration into ourselves, our self-awareness, our self-understanding. He is the second of the mind cards after the strength card. So the strength card, we take the first step into our exploration of the subconscious, our explanation of our inner self, our inner strength, and our inner divinity. And he takes us a little further, and he asks us to actually go deep and research. He compartmentalizes and he manifests, and he calls upon us to engage in all the re's, the reflection, the research, the restoration of ourselves, the rejuvenation of ourselves and our passions. And he asks us to reflect, to re-engage, to reconnect. So in this year, we've had a lot of time to stay indoors and engage in a lot of that soul searching. It has been a year for many of us for looking back at where we are and where we've come to and trying to figure out, do I need to be going back to school? Perhaps. Do I need to be working on different projects? Is what I'm currently working on what I want to be working on? And I think that that's for more than just people who have the Hermit as their card of the year this year. But I think it's especially the case for those individuals. If you have the Hermit card this year, then you felt it more. You felt the inner journey more. You felt the need to withdraw and go deep more this particular year. Again, not saying that that didn't impact pretty much everyone because of the emperor's dysfunction and what he imposed upon all of us. And again, I have another episode on that if you want to talk about boundaries and having those imposed upon us this year and what that does to us. But it is definitely a time for the Hermit year, is a time for identifying those projects that we want to work on, that we're called to work on, and devoting the time to that, devoting the time to working on our inner journey, devoting the time to manifesting that which serves us, that which we're called to do. Very much project management. It's the project management card. Yes. So what you do is you basically can look at, well, here is my personality card. In Abraham Lincoln's case, Temperance Hierophant, who is dealing with your card of the year, dealing with a Hermit card, and put those two together and try and figure out how those energies interplay. How do they assist one another, or potentially hinder one another? And then take that and think on it, meditate on it, and strategize. How do I synthesize these disparate energies into a harmonious balance, into a productive synergy? Just throwing out words there. What is synergy anyway? So I think understanding how Tarotscopes work, understanding how the energies that are out there are potentially impacting us, gives us a better sense of control over that which we can control. We can rise up to meet the energies, or we can ignore them and sometimes let them wreak havoc on our lives and on our plans. I always think it's best, and of course we have free will. Definitely we have free will, but it's always best to understand kind of what you're up against, what hurdles could potentially be there. And how do you make the best of the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, right? All of this is all about zeitgeist. The astrology is all about zeitgeist. What is the spirit of the times? Well, it's the energy that is prevalent because of the time. And that is what, if we look at the cosmos, we say, well, the stars tell us a story. They are the archetypes and they speak to the energy of the times. I think I'm going off on a crazy tangent here. But anyway, so that is how you can calculate your personal pattern of destiny. And that is how you can calculate your card of the year. Now, why would you want to know that information? And what could you do with that information? Well, one thing that's pretty neat to do when you figured out how to calculate your personal pattern of destiny and your card of the year is to chart out your personal card of the year, both retroactively and proactively. Just get a piece of graph paper and chart it out. You can use the lines to the axis, the y-axis to correspond with the number on the trump card, 1 through 22. And you can correspond the x-axis with the years of your life, first year, second year, third year, and so on. And you'll start to see interesting patterns emerge. You'll see certain trends where you have, lines and then sudden jumps. You might have a straight line and then all of a sudden you have a jump and another straight line, and it continues for a while and then it breaks and jumps again. And then when you really sit and look at it, go to each of those points and try to identify what was the major thing or things that happened during that year and see how that correlates with the card that represented your card of the year. Now, again, your card of the year is based on your birthday. So it's from one birthday until the next birthday. So in a way, that's why it's different from the card of the year, which is just for everyone, which is just for the year. So 2020, the Emperor, 2021, the Hierophant. So for part of the year, you will be operating as a, let's say in President Lincoln's case, a Temperance Hierophant who is operating with a Hermit year lesson in a Emperor year. But then let's say 2021 happens, but he hasn't had his birthday yet, and he won't have his birthday until February 12th of 2021. So between January 1st and February 12th, he's still operating with the Hermit lesson, but this time in a Hierophant year, in his own card or his own personality base card. And how is that different when he's operating in a year that matches his base personality versus the previous 10, 11 months in which he had been operating at the Hermit lesson of the year in an Emperor year? So I hope I didn't overcomplicate things there, but maybe I'll do an additional explanation on that at some point. But if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to check out my website. We have classes on this. I do blog posts on this. I'd be happy to engage in more conversations about my passion subject. So I hope that you enjoyed and you got something out of this. You can find out more at learntarology.com. And if you want to reach out to me, if you have anything you'd like me to talk about on this podcast or any other topics of interest, please email me at learntarology@gmail.com. I'm always excited to get emails from people who love to talk tarot with me. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Until next time, take care.